Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to another day of the 11th Annual Transformative Teaching and Learning Environment. This is a conference presented by Northeastern State University. Session today is one of the 60-hour-long sessions we have to Friday of next week. Oh, I'm Bob Hales. I'm your moderator for the session. And we are captioning all of our sessions. And if I actually give Michelle our captioning information, she is going to caption the sessions, but I haven't done that. There we go. Well, I'll talk slowly so Michelle can get ready. But we do close caption all of our sessions. To view the captions, you just have to click on the closed caption icon on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. Michelle has been our captioner for all the sessions so far and probably will for the remaining ones. I think she types over 200 words a minute, which is about 180 words a minute faster than I do. Our session today is modeling real-world problems and authentic assessments and online courses through project-based learning. From Central Michigan University, we have Jennifer Weibel, who's an associate professor in the Department of Teacher Education and Professional Development and director of their doctorate in educational technology. We have Mark DeShane, who's an associate professor of educational leadership. Oh yeah, University of Mississippi. You're in Central Michigan.
I used to be.
But Mark, were you there previously?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right, Todd. Mark also is a research fellow at the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute. And we have Ray Francis, a tenured professor, member of the graduate faculty in the Department of Teacher Education and Professional Development at Central Michigan University in the wonderful Mount Pleasant, Michigan area. So, without further ado, let me turn it over to Jennifer, Ray, and Mark.
Thank you.
I think we're going to start with a little bit of introductions, first of us and then of you also. We figure out who some of you folks are. So, Mark, do you want to?
Sure. My name is Mark DeShane. As Bob said, I used to be at Central Michigan. I'm now at the University of Mississippi in the Department of Educational Leadership. Jen, Ray, and I worked very closely together for the past 4 or 5 years on a number of different initiatives. And what you see here is really a culmination of all of our different areas of interest and loves. And we're just a group of kindred spirits working together, supporting each other to move issues and ideas forward that we think have some utility for other folks. So thank you for being here.
Only it doesn't exactly know who an actor is at special moments that they want to discover more.
Okay, Jen.
Okay. I'm Jen Weibel, and I come here Central from a K-12 background. I taught high school chemistry and physics and did tech integration for the district for 23 years in Pennsylvania. You've probably all heard of the school I was at recently, Groundhog's Day. I was at Punxsutawney with Phil, pretty close by. But this is my 5th year at Central, and I'm really enjoying being able to work with these two great researchers and colleagues, and I'm really happy to be here today.
Outstanding. And my name's Ray Francis. I've since we're talking about whether I'm surviving my first winter in Michigan. I'm originally from a place called Charleston, West Virginia. Thoroughly enjoy it, and it's giving me the opportunity to look at teaching online, focus on online courses at both master's and doctoral level, and focusing on looking at using problem solving and project-based learning as a way to go. So we'd like to welcome you all. It's a nice crowd, as Bob said, and hopefully everybody can see my screen okay. If you hear a bark in the background, you have my apologies, but at some point in time before we're done today, the letter carrier will be by, and that will cause a ruckus. Just letting you know. So, in looking, we don't want to necessarily do introductions. The list of folks that are there are just continuing to grow. However, as we look at PBL, as we look at what it is we've said we would like to take a look at, and we're defining it as problem-based learning, what are some of the things that you're interested in exploring PBL? Anybody?
Feel free to use the chat window also. I know some of you are home with kids and you don't want to unmute, but in the room.
Anybody? How are you looking at PBL? I can whistle the Jeopardy theme. I can also tell you a little bit about, from our perspective, or my perspective, as we look at PBL, it is a carryover for me from teaching and supervising student teachers and looking at that idea of engagement and how do we do things. So, oh, good. Danielle says you work on it on nursing programs. So problem-based learning and application-based learning are huge. That's true. I just recently had a doctoral student finish her work basically in a PBL format, and her dissertation had to do a lot with PBL. We also see that built programming, okay, and you're trying to get away from the discussion rut. And as we look at that discussion rut is something from our tradition. Is discussions at CMU typically are discussion boards. We're trying to move far away from those, although effective in many different ways, and a lot of people use them. We've got a couple of other ideas we wanted to share as we're moving through and moving forward with this.
The one thing I want to lessen expectations a little bit. We don't have the silver bullet here, but we do have a lot of information and ideas. But the thing I think is important is that you take this information back with the people that you're working with, and together you form your own answers. And in a lot of the things that we're attempting to do with PBL with our students, I think it really fits in well with an expansion of professional learning communities or cooperative learning networks, things like that. So we're really looking for your issues and ideas also as we go through this. So we're really wanting to try to make this as interactive as possible.
Mm-hmm. And as a part of that, as what we look at is our programs are the ones that we've been traditionally working with, carry a wide variety of individuals. We don't have all teachers. We don't have all of anything. We have engineering students. We have computer programmers. We have gamers. We have, Jen, any others you can think of?
We have some program directors in medicine. We have people that are working within government and business settings that are looking to move into like online training and providing professional development within those areas, as well as us teaching our graduate courses and how we're thinking about designing it for them with the student hat on, not just how they're going to be taking it back to their own work environment. So I think whenever you start talking about PBL, a lot of times people in a K-12 setting incorporate this very well into their classrooms as ways to bring authentic learning into the classroom and have the students participate as authentic practitioners in science or in math or in history and things like that, and investigate problems trying to use these disciplinary practices in order to reach their standards or their learning goals that are given. But what we're playing with, and we've been kind of talking and kicking around these last couple years with our students, is that they're already in their area. So how can we take the coursework that we have for them, the structure and the content and that kind of thing in our subject areas and make it applicable to them? Because, you know, as you all know, whenever you're teaching adults and working with adults and adult learners, it needs to be something that is compelling to them in order to really engage and be able to make it something that's going to motivate them to push forward and also make it worthwhile. So why do we pick up on PBL versus some of the other things that people call it, inquiry-based learning or case studies or all these other things? We're kind of wrapping PBL into the kind of overall arching framework of what we're looking at, because all these other things can fit within it. And why do we want to use PBL? We have a whole list of reasons here. You can read, but it's able within a structure to have content learning, and it's able to be expanded into other areas. You incorporate all kinds of soft skills and all kinds of 21st century learning pieces with it. We want our students to have deeper learning, we want them to learn how to collaborate. Even though we as individuals, as educators, a lot of times hate being forced to collaborate on projects, we know the benefits of learning for this with our students. Also, a lot of our graduate programs are people that are in the workforce, and they need actual artifacts that they can say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm learning, and they need them to be applicable across a lot of different areas, not just, you know, creating a lesson plan for educators, but when we have people that are working in government and working in business sector, a lesson plan isn't necessarily something that's going to be beneficial for them. So trying to create things that are open-ended and allow students to push the learning in the ways that they need it to go, for them to meet their personal learning goals as well as us to meet our course goals. And then to try to really make it authentic and have some value for the students, and let everybody come to the table with something that they can bring from their past experience. And to come back to what we're actually talking about with this one is demonstrating learning and actually using this for different ways of assessment.
So what we found is that in looking at students from multiple backgrounds and multiple content areas and all these different things, PBL gives us the opportunity to set up an ill-structured problem. It gives us the opportunity to go ahead and have them generate their process and solutions as a good PBL process should, but making use of technology, because for our programs, we stretch across 6 or 8 different time zones. We do a variety of different things, and we'll talk about those in just a bit, but it's something that has been and continues to evolve over time for us.
The interesting thing also is this doesn't have to be a standalone or something that's done in isolation. Here at Ole Miss, we have a Doctor of Education in EDD, and we use the Carnegie CPED unit, and we have what are called dissertations in practice. And I'm finding that having students actually do program evaluation types of work, utilizing a lot of these PBL pieces, I use the Blackboard and the online as a supplementary way for our students to do all of these things that are listed on this page. And the nice thing about it is they go in, they do the deep dive, they do the work themselves, then they come back and they share that content and that work and those artifacts with their colleagues. So not only are students exposed to a real deep dive, and I'll keep using that term, with the things that they're specifically responsible for, but their ability to look at and critique and to support each other's projects within their cohort, I think is an incredibly powerful piece that I think we would have a real difficult time actually doing in a traditional face-to-face environment. So in a lot of ways, I think the online learning environment has not only given us an awful lot of flexibility, but an awful lot of opportunity to rethink the way we do things and to document what we have expected of our students so that we can create this knowledge management structure that Ray and I have done some research in to support different areas of student achievement and assessment.
So as we look at those kinds of things, and then we oftentimes get the question, well, that's problem-based or that's project-based. We see a huge difference in them, although they both get abbreviated as PBL. Whenever we take a look at project-based learning, we see that as, in many different ways, a lower level process, a lower level activity on almost any scale we look at. Where we see problem-based learning, that idea of taking a problem, working through, gathering information, taking and proposing a solution, actually working through with your peers and colleagues, creating the solution and moving forward to answer a question. We see that as addressing so many more of the potential higher order thinking skills or upper level, the Maslow's hierarchy, however you would like to measure it. We see that the differences in where the process moves. We also see and continue to look at that idea of problem-based learning is looking at an overarching question or problem, an ill-structured, something that's not a correct answer. For example, if you're looking at, trying to find out, will the weather in Michigan be clear skies and blue skies today? The answer is no. Very definite, very straightforward. Versus how does the overall weather impact the Great Lakes? And going into, as a group, for example, just recently learned that one of the biggest issues in lake erosion or beach erosion in Michigan happens to be lack of ice cover in the winter, because there's the ice flows, the ice covering the lakes in Michigan is only at about 20% this year. There's a huge problem with beach erosion that's going on because there's nothing to stop the waves from coming in and eroding the beach and all these different things. It could have been a very neat part of a problem to answer or to explore. And there's no clear consensus on how to answer the question. How do we go about it? So individuals in a group have to work together. And I'm sure this is sort of preaching to the choir about the idea of problem-based learning, but as we look at it, it's important to remember that the answer or the process to get to the answer becomes a key element in what we're doing. You all agree? Jen, you're nodding.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you two would like to add?
No.
No, you did a good job with that.
Well, thanks.
Any questions or comments that you have, feel free to either jump in on the chat board or raise your hand.
Yeah. I will say, with the overarching question, that's probably the hardest part for those of you that haven't really done a lot of PBL before. One of the most difficult pieces in trying to structure PBL within face-to-face or online classrooms is coming up with this question that is targeted enough that you hit the objectives and that you have for your course, and also wide enough that students are able to take it in a direction that they want. And one way that we've been pretty successful in doing this is really by focusing on what we are doing within our courses a lot of times as a vehicle or as the mechanism, and then allowing students to take their content area as the vehicle to drive it with. So for example, if we're talking about motivation, and we're talking about motivation broadly and looking at theoretical constructs of it and how this plays out in an online or in a blended learning or in a face-to-face place. But then we ask the students to pick a piece of their world to host that within. So we may not have any content area whatsoever in multimedia marketing of mobile devices or something like that, but we have a lot of expertise when we're working through it in like the theoretical background for this. And so that's what we're using then, is the students can take it and go anywhere with it with their subject area, and that makes it very applicable to them. And it brings a lot of different perspectives too, because what I found is how somebody in business actually approaches PBL within their training or within their work area compared to how somebody in education may attack it or look at structuring it is often quite different, and it provokes a lot of interesting conversations then.
And we had a couple of comments in the chat about you do a lot. For example, one comment was they do a lot of PBL kinds of things in traditional brick and mortar setting. How do you do it in online? And I think one of the perspectives you will hear from all of us is that it's just the way we teach. Now, I don't mean to say that in an odd way, other than to say through technology, there is a opportunity for you to do just about anything online that you can do face-to-face. I mentioned, we have students from around the world basically in one of the programs that I teach in. And in saying that, their PBL or their process involves both a synchronous and an asynchronous portion. They don't all, because of time zones, they don't all attend class at the exact same time perhaps, but the classes are recorded. They do have to make time to meet as a group. So sometimes that's early in the morning, sometimes that's later on in the evening, but they're doing it synchronously. We make use of Zoom extensively in our doctoral and master's program, and we make use of WebEx and others. So there's a lot of different ways. Basically, almost anything you're thinking about doing as a traditional face-to-face piece, you can do online. Sometimes it's just a matter of trusting in how your students will react to things and how they will work through things. We encountered a lot of different anxieties of people when working online. And over the course of their program or over the course of an individual course, they relaxed, they got more comfortable working with each other. And we found that they continue to make time to chat with others as they're doing things. So as we talk about the process of PBL, it's a fairly, Jen doesn't like when I say it this way, but it's a fairly traditional perspective of PBL, but it's applied in a very progressive, nuanced kind of technology-based process.
Well,
If you look at what we do, what we do is traditional. How we do it is what we consider innovative. Jen?
I think too, one thing to keep in mind, if you're really comfortable with PBL in the face-to-face setting, a lot of times when you put students in face-to-face groups, they make assumptions. And they, each tackle their own piece, and they do their own piece, and then they slam it together, and they make a lot of assumptions about what the other person knows and is doing and that kind of thing. And I do think that doing it online, especially if they're working asynchronously, it really does require a different level of thinking and of articulating their understanding, because the students can't see each other's faces if they're not on Zoom, if they're doing this asynchronously. A lot of times they're writing out notes to each other about what is been done or not being done if they're working collaboratively. And we find a good bit of them actually elaborating on what their understanding is of it, or how they're understanding it, or how the nuances of each person's understanding of it becomes articulated a lot more detail than sometimes face-to-face does, because of the assumptions we make when we're working in face-to-face groups. So I do think the technology that is being used and how it's structured, and that allows you to really deepen the students' understanding in ways that sometimes face-to-face I'm not saying it gets glossed over, but sometimes it can be easy to slip past some of these pieces because the students do make assumptions.
I think one of the really important things when we're talking about PBL and higher ed is and we don't talk about this enough, but we're really shifting away from a pedagogical approach to an andragogical approach. Pedagogy typically it talks about how we're going to support the needs of younger learners, you know, traditional K-12 learners. And Knowles in 54, I think it was, talked about the neglected species, the adult learner. And he has this whole different set of assumptions that adults bring to the learning environment. And I think PBL really fits in well with what he says. I mean, adults are looking for things that have almost immediate application when they get it and when they use it. They really like to work on things that are problem-centered so that there's that immediacy. They're seeing some utility and efficacy in the amount of energy they're putting forward. They become very self-directed in what they're doing because the problems or the projects that they're immersed in really are driven by not only the needs of the program or the goals and objectives of your curriculum, but also it's immersed within their environment. So they're actually putting effort into making things better and in implementing change initiatives in their own work environment. The other idea is learners are a huge resource for each other, and they're just a rich resource for not only teaching other students, but learning themselves. And then there's this whole idea that people come to our learning environment at different levels of readiness, of content, of experience, of a whole lot of things. PBL, I think, really is helpful because it allows you to differentiate instruction in a way that traditional things don't. And it gives you an idea as an instructor, you can pull up like Webb's depth of knowledge. You can look at Bloom's taxonomy in the cognitive domain, old school. I'm not a big fan of the new school, primarily because I can't remember it, or other kinds of rubrics or metrics. It gives students an opportunity to self-assess themselves and to provide feedback before they move forward with you. So there are a number of different reasons why we find PBL to be so attractive and supportive of what we're trying to do in online learning environments. Thank you, Dawn.
All right, so this is just a listing of some of the ways that people talk about PBL, different ways to approach it. And we've played with a lot of these different ways to look at this and work with this. But challenge projects and Genius Hour, those kind of work within the same challenge projects. You provide a place where students want to start and they have a product or an end goal that they want to get to. Curiosity and choice and Genius Hour work a lot more in the similar pattern where you let the students kind of drive it. These are a lot of times structured this way or listed this way for K-12, and how we're applying them then to the higher education level. It could be, you know, a challenge project could be, you know, how are you going to model culturally appropriate dialogue within your classroom or culturally relevant pedagogies within your classroom. It could be, you know, within your work area, how are you going to push forward some kind of initiative that ties in something along similar lines? How are you going to provide training for all of your department members or all of your people on your floor for using culturally appropriate language? Curiosity, choice, and Genius Hour tend to be more student-centered and more open, where it's something that the student has an idea about and they would drive that more. And then role play is pretty much what it says. It's sort of structured. You provide some kind of framework for how they're going to interact, and then that can be worked out. And that happens really well when supported by online conferencing such as Zoom like we're using right now, students can easily do that and work with that. They can record it and go back and analyze what they did and the interactions they had and come up with ways to push forward. And then messy data, I will turn it over to Renee. That's the fun part. That's what they like to.
Mark will do this part.
Yeah, Ray and I have done an awful lot of work in a topic that we've coined messy data. All right, it's ways to do assessment, both from a qualitative and a quantitative perspective, and to pull things together and actually allow groups or individuals to assign value based on a number of different areas. It's very interesting because I think we've stumbled upon a new methodological approach, not just for program development and improvement, but also individual assessment. But we contend that so much of what we are doing in education is relational. It is much more organic in its growth. It's less standardized. It is much more open to interpretation. And that's one of the things that we find, especially with adults, that the traditional top-down standardized assessment really doesn't work well. So you've got to really deal with a lot of subjective data that comes in, and you need to figure out a way to make it and turn it into information. We could do an entire day-long session on messy data. In fact, Ray and I have done workshops and trainings on this, and it's a way beyond what we're doing here. But what we want to encourage you to do, and we're more than happy to help you with that in the future, just let us know. But we're wanting you to think about, how are you going to qualify and quantify the work product? And when you start doing that, you need to recognize that that data is going to be incredibly messy. And it's going to take you some time to really think about it. But when you're thinking about the assessment and the evaluation of experiences or work product, it just can't be an instructor-driven activity. It really needs to include the student.
And I think that being willing to allow your students to have messy data and just asking them to solve it is a way that this works really well in a classroom. You know, here's a couple data sets that belong to a problem. You know, how do you want to solve this? Here are some approaches we've used. You know, think about these things, but then letting the students actually sort through their data and just kind of guiding them as they're going through is one of the ways that we can really make this relevant and authentic with our students then.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Authenticity is huge. I mean, the learning occurs in messy, right? We learn the most when we get messy.
And as we look at different ways, as on the previous slide we had, again, whatever you're doing, and this is just a brief list of, well, in PBL, what do you do? Well, first of all, you have to clarify the concepts. It's not fair to ask the students to solve a problem if they don't have the prerequisite skills or the ideas that they need. So we need to help them with that. We need to define the problem, but we need to not define it clearly enough that they don't have to struggle with it. And somebody was mentioning, you know, the idea of, well, I'd like to move this into teaching online and things. And what we find, at least what I find, speak for myself instead of everybody, is that the hardest thing to do online for me is not answer the question. I can always remember if Mark and I are having a conversation and Mark asks a question, I can remember if we're face to face and say, no, you can figure that out. But if we're online and somebody sends me an email, it takes me longer to generate the email so that I'm not just telling them the answer is 42 or things like that. It's much more difficult for me. So defining the problem, analyzing the problem, those kinds of things are the things we have to encourage them to have the opportunity to do. In some of our classes, one of the things we do is approach it from a learning community perspective. So they have their big class group, and then they have smaller synchronous meetings where they have to work through things, and we run them as cooperative grouping. So somebody is in charge of setting up the meeting time and space. Somebody's in charge of designing the questions. Somebody's in charge of a variety of different things, so that when they get together, they're all invested. And as they go through it, they work through defining the problem together. So they have a common understanding. They work through then analyzing the problem, or they come up with the tasks they need to do that. And it's interesting to find and to watch them engage in this problem solving process, because they begin to employ so much more information from other courses and from their own professional background in what they're doing. So just keep in mind that as they're going through the things that you might want to do as an online process, it's okay to do them, because the technology is going to give us the opportunity to do that. I mean, just even looking at where we're at today here in a mediated conference setting, where just a few years ago we would have all had to travel somewhere very nice and warm or very frigid and cold. Kind of depends on what we're looking at or where we wanted to be. Again, just to reiterate some of the benefits: engaging and motivating by connecting to the community locally and globally. As we generate problems, depending on whether you're talking about undergraduate, graduate, and what kinds of things, you can look at local problems to solve. You can look at global problems to approach. You can look at those kind of things and ask your students to generate it. We as faculty don't always have to be the ones distributing out the answers and things. We can be the facilitators. And in doing that, we help to deepen understandings through connections, through communication, through sharing. It turns out so much better for students, because we find that in the course of a program of study, they maintain that over time. They maintain that levels of interest or processes that we give them. Again, we don't just turn them loose. We help coach them into things, but we also don't give them the answers. Just checking the chat.
One of the things I find really interesting when you turn students loose in a synchronous online learning environment and you're starting to do some of these things, academic wait time is one of those things that it takes a long time as a supporter to the learner to deal with, and you become incredibly uncomfortable with it. But it's even more uncomfortable for the students. And it's a very interesting signal. Over time, my students know when I get quiet, it's because I'm wanting them to think deeper. And I basically tell them that. I scaffold their learning by saying, when I do this, it means that. And I flat out tell them that we're preparing people to be school administrators. I want higher order thinking skills. I want application and analysis and synthesis, right? And one of the things that I think that we don't do is give our students enough, I don't want to say rules, but enough ideas as to how we are approaching the content ourselves, so that they get an understanding of how we want them to approach the content, if that makes any sense at all.
Modeling.
It also, we find that it doesn't matter. PBL doesn't matter based on grade level. Have Jen and her research in things like buggy science and stuff like that are PBL activities at their core for middle school students or upper elementary students. And we have similar kinds of things that we do with our directed teaching, our student teaching experience, our look at graduate programs at the master's level, doctoral level. We're firm believers in it. And we're still firm believers in that idea of having it be a student-driven process, to where we help them gain concepts and knowledge and then apply them through a different perspective or through solving their problem. So.
Somebody sent me a private message and asked me to give some more information on this whole idea of messy data. And I'm sending you to a book chapter that Ray and I wrote with somebody else, and that we're trying to incorporate with the work that we're doing with Jen on how do you make sense of things. And I think this would be a great way for you to conceptualize maybe some of the issues related to PBL.
Mhm.
And that culminating project and artifact that Jen talks about, it can be a relatively simple thing, or it can be a relatively complex thing. And it depends on the sophistication level, expertise of your students, and the expectations you set forward. Sometimes we get people we work with who say, "Oh, well, their project was pretty simple." Well, what was the question you asked them to answer? If you ask them to answer a relatively simple question, don't expect a sophisticated kind of a device like a mousetrap where it's got 35 steps and things like that. If you ask them a complicated, ill-defined, ill-structured question that they have to work their way through, you're more likely to see the kinds of things that demonstrate their abilities to work together and individually to work through things.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello?
Yes?
Do you want to switch slides, Ray?
Yep, sorry.
We only, we only have about 11 or 12 minutes left.
Oh
So,
my.
yes. All right. So some of the tools that we use for supporting PBL online, the Google Suite is phenomenal. All of you are probably familiar with that, with be able to do documents and proposals, building web pages, that kind of thing. They tend to be fairly simple to use. Most students have a handle on how to use the Google Suite. There's also being able to use like Wix or Weebly. There's other WordPress, things like that that students can use to publish their answers and the results publicly, where then it's able to be more authentic because of the people that are able to see it. Zoom that we're using today is a phenomenal collaboration tool and also a phenomenal screencasting tool to be able to capture things. A lot of our students are using Voxer and WhatsApp to do their behind the scenes chat. Since we have international students, that's something that we are able to really capitalize on because it isn't costing them. They're able to use it free as long as they have some Wi-Fi available. Screencastify is also screencasting, and our students have used that to create tutorials, to create overviews of things, providing a reflection or demonstrating, walking through how they've applied things on a spreadsheet or how they've applied things on an evaluation document. For those of you that are not familiar with Flipgrid, Flipgrid is a video discussion board. It is free to all educators, and we've used it with anywhere from, I've used it from kindergarten through, with a little bit of help and support, through doctoral students, to be able to communicate with each other, to have ideas that they're able to discuss asynchronously, and then it provides you a way to assess as well with rubrics that are available or you can create behind the scenes. I've used Seesaw as well with professional development with teachers and having them model work. It's targeted towards younger, but it's a really great place to create a digital portfolio and to share information. MyHistro is also an interesting app to use as well with the timeline and that. Go ahead.
For those of you who have the Microsoft Office suite, I really want to encourage you to use the Teams and the OneNote. OneNote, they have an opportunity for you to create classroom notebooks, and anything that can be digitized can be put in there. Because one of the things when we start talking about PBL, we very quickly move away from a textbook driven kind of a system. One of the other things you might want to consider doing is over time, as you collect the student work, I think one of the next extensions to this, and we've talked about this, the three of us, is how do we move this into an OER type of a format? How do we essentially utilize the artifacts and the tools that were developed by previous courses and use that as an instructional support for future classes? So one of the things that I think we've got to recognize is this idea of incorporating PBL is running smack dab into what a lot of people are saying is best practice for online learning. And it just takes a little bit of forward thinking to make some quick relationships with other things that you're doing.
And there are a lot of different ideas. For example, developing case studies to answer a question or to answer the problem. Many times we have teachers, administrators, managers who can identify a problem that already exists. Frequently in our program, we take a look at having students take a look at conferences. And as a group project, the idea is look at a call for a conference. You're going to write then a proposal. What do you have to do? How does that all fit in there? Many different things like that. I'll let Jen finish the last ones in a minute. But I also posted in the chat a couple of things. There's a website, 50 Ideas for PBL. It's great. It's a variety of grade levels. And you can adapt them up. It's not just, oh, that's a middle school idea. It's an up. Mm-hmm. Adapt it up for the things that you want to do. She also mentioned Padlet. So Jen, you want to talk about that and those other couple of ones?
There was a couple we left off on our list that I was thinking about last night that I just dropped into the chat. Padlet is one. It's like a kind of like a bulletin board that you get 3 of them free. I fully believe in free resources. So Padlet, you get 3 free. You can delete your boards or, use another email to create it so you have some more boards or keep building on them. But students can post resources or you can post resources for that. And it works really well to, as an instructor, to curate some resources for especially younger learners if you want them to be very direct, but it also is phenomenal for students to pull work, curate ideas from all over the places they're developing, what they want to do, or where they want to go with their final artifact, and also as a way to display their understandings of things through either things that they've created or else curated across. Video creation with YouTube and the YouTube editing things, that's a phenomenal way for students to produce their work, especially if you're working with undergraduates. Everything is YouTube now. That's how they learn a lot of their stuff. That's how they communicate between that and TikTok and some of these other things. So being able to kind of harness that and think about how you would use that as a culminating project. What would you be able to do with video? Is it going to be, they have this paper project that they have, but really what you're going to assess them on is their 3-minute Shark Tank speech. This is your idea. This is where your everything is kind of distilled down. That can be done through like YouTube and sharing it. That can also be done through Flipgrid and having commenting. What is the strength? Do a SWOT analysis on this 5-minute Shark Tank speech. You're pitching your idea that you want somebody to be able to, theoretically fund. If you're in business, especially, or engineering, this is my prototype. This is what we've come up with. Here's the research that backs it. Pick us. And then you can have students and faculty or outside people talking about this and communicating with them and providing this kind of feedback. So you have them doing something that is authentic to not only their discipline, but the content knowledge and the practices within it that you want them to develop. And that ties back into the case studies that Claire was talking about. We know, even as like student, Ray, what's it called? Sarah did her dissertation on it. The people that do
they're the
student,
pretenders,
yeah, the student patients or the standard patients, standard students or standard
patients.
yeah, standard patients, things like that, where the students have to work with, I'm sorry, I drew a blank, where they're developing a case study about a disease or developing a case study about an entire scenario of this person coming in, so that it can be given to these student patient and standard patients, so that medical students that are practicing with them can come in and have this fully fleshed out idea about what they need to know. And that gives the students that are developing them an enormous deep dive on it. Plus, how would a student portray this? Or how would somebody portray this? So it's making them look at it from different perspectives, as well as trying to, structure some of the script in that they would have empathy developed, or that it would push on areas for the medical students. For people in education and other places that are looking at students going to conferences or presenting their work, having them actually targeting a conference, targeting an article, targeting a white paper, writing a grant. These are authentic learning things that require you to develop enormous knowledge within your subject and your disciplinary area in order to develop these things. And then it's something that is real and not just a paper that they're writing for you.
Okay, we've got a couple minutes left, and one of the things I think we should do is open up, unless we've got some slides we really need to get
Nope.
to. We've been sharing resources back and forth. I'm going to give you access to something that used to be called Buck's Institute of Education, BIE. It's more project-based learning here, but the tools that exist are incredible. Obviously, they're K-12 oriented, but you might want to just look at them to get an idea as to some of the support materials that you can have, as both Jen and Ray said, to scale up. But are there any questions up to this point? Comments, concerns?
Snow weather reports.
Any resources
Yeah.
you have that you're using that you'd like to share that you think would be beneficial for everybody? You're very welcome. Oh boy.
Well, have fun.
Yeah, be safe on that one, Claire.
Be careful. Okay. I think any closing pieces, Mark, Jen?
I think about a little over a minute to go.
Well, if we can help in any way, you know how to get a hold of us. Let us know what you're thinking, and if you want to just kick some ideas off of each other, we'd be more than happy to help you.
Yeah, and Tyler Frank said, how can online PBL be adapted to learners who have less skill with technology? A lot of the tools are very easy to use. We use them, like I said, I use them with elementary people, and I don't mean elementary teachers, I mean elementary kids. So Flipgrid itself is pretty simple to use. Most people can handle a Word document. Jumping between technologies is one way that people get caught a little bit if they're not as skilled. So if you feel like your people that you're working with are very technology phobic, scaling down the options that they have instead of giving them 17 options. Like I'll tell my students, here are 15 different ways you can give it to me. I don't care how you do it. I just need to have, this is what I need to know from you.
Yeah.
So scaling back on the number of examples that you give them, maybe giving them 2 or 3 that they're very familiar with, and then 1 that's a stranger, and kind of modeling that, scaffolding it in front of and with them, and giving them some good either links to tutorials on YouTube or some really good structured notes on how to use it. And they'll be surprised, you'll be surprised, and they will too, by the end of the project, how well they have gotten around those tools. And then once the fear is lessened a little bit, you can open it up a little bit more.
One of the things I'd suggest you do really quickly is begin with the end in mind. Ask them what do they want to accomplish with the technology, and then you could show them, as Jen says, maybe some basic things and hit one or two areas and allow them to feel successful with that. And as they get a comfort level, you can increase either the depth of complexity of that specific tool or help them find something else.
Mhm. Definitely.
And we are out of time. I'm sorry to say. Really, thanks. That was really good stuff for us. So thanks to Mark, Ray, and Jennifer. And about 4 or 5 minutes, we'll have our next session. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Oh, you know what we forgot to say? We assess them with like real world stuff. Like, here's the rubric that, here's as we talk about assessment. Like,